as we look at the whole landscape of all the 6 games that took place over the weekend, 3 on Saturday and 3 on Sunday, I thought I watched, first of all 6 games, right? And I went to one of them in person. And so I feel like I have a pretty good sense for the totality of the NFL landscape right now, right? So how would I have assessed, if I had to rank them 1 to 6, who was the most impressive and who was the most unimpressive in terms of getting wins? Now, there's no such thing as an unimpressive win in the NFL playoffs. It's so hard to get to the playoffs, and it's so hard to win a playoff game that I don't think you ever sit back and say, oh, that was an awful performance. If you win, it's a lot like the NCAA tournament. You survive and advance in a one-game setting. Even if you don't bring forth your best effort, you just shake it off, you go back to the drawing board, and you get an opportunity to be better, okay? Having said that, here is how I would assess the overall performances, 1 to 6. I thought the Browns were the best team in the NFL playoffs relative to what I expected to see. I should add that caveat. Relative to what I expected to see, the Browns were the best performing team in the NFL playoffs. Let me just repeat what I just said, because if you're a Browns fan and you're listening to me right now, you have probably spent your entire life dreaming of hearing that said effectively. The Browns were the best team in the NFL playoffs this weekend. They really were. They went out and dominated. They scored more points in the first quarter than has ever happened in the history of the NFL. They were extraordinary when you actually looked at taking advantage of the Steeler mistakes. They put this game away, and I know there was a little bit of nervousness, late trepidation, but really, they never really, because Mike Tomlin made the decision to punt instead of go for it, which is infuriating, I think, if you're a Steeler fan. But when the Browns score as many points as they did, when you give up 28 in the first quarter and the Browns roll like they did, I don't think if you're a Steeler fan, you can really sit back and say, hey, there was any one thing that cost us this game. You almost gave up 50 points to the Cleveland Browns at home. Now, home field advantage doesn't matter as much as it used to, but the Browns were the best team in the NFL on Super Wild Card weekend, okay? So I've got the Browns number 1. Second best team. May surprise some people, the Rams. Look, the Rams had to go on the road with a quarterback with an injured thumb in Jared Goff. They somehow, I never really understand how this works. You're not healthy enough to start the game, but as soon as the starting quarterback gets hurt, you're healthy enough to be able to come into the game. It doesn't really make any sense to me how that process works. And I'm far from a doctor. I need to get Dr. Chow on this week to actually explain to me how that process ends up working. But the Rams went on the road, and I thought they pretty much controlled that game throughout against the Seahawks. And look, the reality is Sean McVay is having to win in a different way than he has before. But when you get a double-digit win on the road against a division rival that had just beaten you to win the division, I think you have to give a lot of credit to the Rams. So I've got the Browns with the best performance. I've got the Rams with the second best performance. Maybe a little bit critical. Maybe you can argue that I should have the Saints higher because they just absolutely throttled the Bears, other than a late Jimmy Graham one-handed touchdown catch where he made it and he just went jogging right into the tunnel, which was pretty funny. I mean, he may retire. That might have been the final moment we ever see Jimmy Graham. He caught it. They didn't even do the point after conversion. It was on the final play of the game, and he just kept jogging right into the tunnel. That in and of itself was pretty funny. But the Saints dominated against the Bears. Their defense completely took over this game, and really you never felt like the Bears had a remote chance to win this football game. And so, although the drop touchdown pass from the Bears early, that obviously could have changed the way that this game felt. So I've got the Saints as the third best performing team. I've got the Bucs at 4 because I never really felt like they were ever behind. They were never out of control of their game against Washington, even though Taylor Heinicke made a lot of big plays throughout the course of his game, and I hope made himself a decent amount of money. I mean, when you consider how many different quarterbacks the Washington football team started, I thought Taylor Heinicke, you'd have to be pretty ecstatic about the performance that he put out there. And Brady is just an ageless wonder. But the Bucs didn't totally put away the Washington football team like I thought they would have. And so that's why I've got them down at the 4 spot. Then I've got the Ravens at 5. This was the game that I went to. I went and watched the Titans play against the Ravens, and the Ravens had control of the game a lot after they came back from the 10-0 deficit, but it was 10-10 at the half. They score on the opening drive of the third quarter, and then there's a lot of back and forth and whatnot, and then the Titans have the ball. I mean, again, this is just frustrating. I'm going to get into this, I think, to finish off the show, but the Titans have the ball, and they're in a position at 4th and 2. Actually, it was 2nd and 2, and then they threw the ball on 2nd and 3rd down. But they're sitting there at 4th and 2 from the Raven 40, and they make the decision to punt. I don't understand it. And as a result, the Ravens come back down, kick a field goal eventually, game's over. So the Ravens, they won 20-13, but I didn't think they looked electric. And then the team that won, and Bills fans are probably not going to be happy with me, but the team that won that I thought was probably the wobbliest in actually being able to get the win was the Bills. And if you actually go out and look at the Bills' performance, just okay. I do think that the NFL dodged a major bullet, and it feels like forever ago because this was the early kick on Saturday. But I feel like the NFL dodged a major bullet when the Bills got the stop late on the Colts. Because if the Colts had come back to win that football game, I think that many people, including me and everybody out there listening, would have been like, my goodness, the NFL basically gave that game away. Because that felt like, to me, it was a fumble late. I know they might be arguing, and I'm sure this is what they said, although I never went back and read the official comments from the official, but that they couldn't 100% tell that his knee wasn't down when he was initially touched. And so as a result, the ruling on the field that he had been down for the fumble stayed. And technically, I can understand that argument because you're only supposed to change the ruling, as we have all heard a billion times, if there is incontrovertible evidence. In other words, if everybody can tell that the call was wrong. And I think that he was back up when he fumbled, but I'm not 100% that he was. So I can maybe see that argument. But the Bills, to me, even though they had control in that game a little bit, as soon as the Colts got the ball to be able to drive back and potentially win it with a touchdown or tie it with a field goal, to me, that became the overall storyline where you're like, man, if you're a Bills fan, it took everything for you to be able to get your first playoff victory in 25 years. Congrats, Bills Mafia. So that is my ranking of the 6 teams in the order in which they performed the best. Browns 1, Rams 2, Saints 3, Bucks 4, Ravens 5, and the Bills in the 6th spot. Dub, how would you assess my rankings of all of the teams that won this weekend? And I'm already kind of looking ahead and at these matchups that we've got coming forward. You know, the Packers are hosting the Rams. I know the Packers have a great pass offense. The Rams have a great pass defense. The Saints are a 3-point favorite against the Bucks. Browns on the road against the Chiefs, probably like, depending on where you're looking, the Chiefs are around an 8-point plus favorite. And then the Ravens right around a field goal underdog against the Bills. To me, the game, and we'll talk a lot about these games all week, and they all look pretty good. I love the divisional round weekend matchups. But to me, the Saints against the Bucks, that's going to be an intriguing story, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it a lot. but can the Bucs have made improvements such that you always hear it's hard to beat a team a third time? Will we see in that Drew Brees against that Drew Brees against Tom Brady matchup that a third time, again, the Saints defense dominates? I'm kind of intrigued to see that. But how would you assess the 6 that I broke down in that order based on their performance?
Yeah, I was pretty much impressed with every team that won, except for the Bills. I would have Bills ranked 6th on that list as well, because when you really look at it, they probably should have lost that game because the Colts were down there first and goal in that game.
Elected not to kick the field goal.
Right. They went for it on 4th and goal. Phillip Rivers just kind of slightly overthrew Pittman, I believe it was,
I think that's right.
Corner of the end zone. And then Rodrigo Blankenship knocks one off the upright from 30 yards. So there's 10 points right there.
Yep.
If those two plays, or situations go like they would have probably expected, the Bills probably don't even win this game. So I was really impressed with Baltimore going on the road and beating a hot Tennessee team. That was a defensive battle, oddly enough.
I can't believe that the Titans' offense. I mean, if you had told me, I'm glad I didn't know, if you had told me that the Ravens were only going to score 20 points, I am terrified to know how much I would have bet on the Titans to win this game.
Yeah, you
because
and me both.
If you had told me, hey, the Titans just need 21 to beat the Ravens, I would have been like, with this Titans offense, there's no way they aren't hitting 21. So that was disappointing to see that as a Titans fan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. I will say it was cold in Nashville, and being on the sunny side of the stadium was probably the only good thing about that performance, and getting to go with my 10-year-old. But I still felt like the Ravens could have lost that game. Like the Browns never really – I know there was a little bit of a wobbly moment in the third quarter where you thought, hey, it's 35-23 maybe, and the Steelers have the ball. Maybe if they score here to make it 35-30, that the Browns end up crumbling. The Rams, I felt like, had pretty good control over their game. The Saints, I mean, you can argue maybe I should have the Saints higher because the Saints really just throttled. I mean, the Bears just absolutely dominated them. The Bucs were never able to totally pull away, but it didn't ever really feel like they were in very much danger. And then, like I said, you said the Bills probably could have lost. The Ravens could have lost too if the Titans had made some a little bit better coaching decisions potentially. But as a result, we are now dealing with the old guys versus the young gunners. Which are you more intrigued by now? The AFC Final Four or the NFC Final Four?
I think definitely the NFC. Because you mentioned these guys are ageless wonders, and we got a matchup between two of them in New Orleans coming up where the Saints have pretty much dominated the Bucs this year already in their 2 games. And you mentioned a few minutes ago about, is it hard to beat the same team 3 times in 1 year? And I found some interesting data here, and the answer to that question is no, because this situation has happened 21 times since 1970, and the team that has won the 2 regular season matchups has won the 3rd round battle 14 times out of the 21. So is it hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 season? Apparently not.
Yeah, and I do think I wonder a little bit whether the Bucs have improved a lot as a team as the season has gone on, just because Brady's gotten more and more used to being with them, and whether that factors in as well. Because the first game, remember, between these 2 teams was literally week 1. Now, the Saints came on the road later in the season and really whipped the Bucs as well. We're going to be breaking down that game all week.